My name is Steve Baker, and I'll be walking you through the 10 steps that are needed to get from a project concept all the way up to reality. First thing I'd like to do is go through a little bit of housekeeping. I have everybody's microphones and webcams muted right at this point, so I don't want everybody talking over each other. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see a chat window. Here you can go and post some information about yourself or introduce yourself or pose any questions there, and I'll try to answer those as we get towards the end of the webinar here. So let me introduce myself. My name is Steve Baker, and I'm an architect in Colorado. I've been serving the Catholic Church and our architectural needs for about 20 years now. I say I've worked on things from fonts all the way up to basilicas and anything in between. I'm also working on my PhD in Catholic Sacred Architecture at the University of Colorado, Denver. And part of that is an educational aspect. I'd like to offer up this webinar as an educational series on how to help parishes start with their building projects. I often find at the initial meetings with pastors or parish administrators that there's a lot of confusion or mystery to how to get a project off the ground. And usually a lot of my practice is educating. So part of this is going to be helping to educate people who might have a need for services. So I want to offer my thank you for coming and joining this webinar, and I want to respect your time. So we'll probably be looking for about a half-hour presentation, and we're getting through these 10 steps. So we have 10 steps to get through in a half-hour time, so that adds up to about 2 minutes each topic. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So a good way to understand the building process is to think of the metaphor of the building project. So using the metaphor of laying a foundation, building walls, adding roof, finishing it all out, and then actually occupying it is a good way of understanding these process, and we'll be using that metaphor throughout this webinar. So let's begin with an overview of the 10-step process, and then we'll dive into each one of these as we proceed. So we begin with programming and conceptual design, then it moves into what's called schematic design. From there it gets a PFRC, typically with an archdiocese or a diocese. There's an archdiocesan review for finances to see if you can make the project successful. Number 4 is fundraising, and that's where we actually ask the parishioners or benefactors to help support our project. From there, it moves into what's called design development, and then construction documents, bidding and negotiations, contract administration, construction administration, occupancy, and warranty. And at that point, you're able to move into the building and enjoy it. So in the first 2 steps, you can think of these as building the foundation for your project. Here we are laying down the concrete, digging the dirt, finding the location, and building the foundation where everything else is built upon that piece. So you can see the first 2 and the 3rd and 4th are probably the most critical for getting a successful project. And then from there, everything else gets built upon that. Now, it's not an automatic situation, but it usually, once the foundation is laid, the framing and the roof and the walls and everything else kind of proceeds straight off of that in a likewise manner so that you can get to occupying the building. So at this early stage, we'll be spending a little bit more time on these 2 objects here during our webinar. And at that point, I'll just briefly describe these next 10 steps or the next 5 steps because they're pretty much an automatic process once it gets to the architect, consultants, and contractors. All right, so let's begin with programming and conceptual design. So in the programming and conceptual design phase, there are several different approaches to going about developing the program. And basically, the program becomes a program booklet which documents all of the discussions and everything that we've heard and listened to from the parish leaders, the priest, the bishop, or even building committee members. Now, there are several different approaches to developing the program. We can work with parish-wide workshops where we have like 6 nights where we'll open it up to the entire parish in a town hall style gathering where everybody can voice their opinions and put in their 2 cents on what the parish needs or what they feel is the future goal and dream and vision of the parish. We can also work with just a building committee where we have just a few key parish leaders who meet and discern what is going to happen with the parish building project. And then there's also a method where we work one-on-one with the priest, bishop, or key leaders and develop what the program and needs are of the parish. Now, there are pros and cons to all of these different approaches, but the key to all of them is that we listen while we document, study, and advise. So let's go ahead and dive into what a programming booklet and the outcome of programming looks like, and I think that'll give you a better understanding of what programming and conceptual design phase entails. All right, so the first step in conceptual design and programming is to actually document what exactly you have in your existing facilities. What you're seeing here is what's called a Lidar or a point cloud documentation of a church that we are working with in Colorado. And what it does, we spend about a day or 2 out measuring the building, and it sends lasers around the entire building and captures the accuracy of the building down to the millimeter. So we can virtually take the building back with us to the office, and we can work virtually anywhere. And if there's any measurement or dimension that we missed while we're out on the field, we can quite easily just draw a tape measure on here and snap from here to here and measure. And this is in meters, but you get the idea. So the beauty of this, not only is it a amazingly cool technology, but it does allow for us to generate much more accurate as-built drawings. And an as-built drawing is basically how it was built. We'll normally find in a lot of, specifically in our older buildings, that the documents are very rough or non-existent. So be able to generate documents of the building exactly how it is and where things are as it got built is very critical to starting with the accurate drawings. So when you're beginning your project, using this kind of technology allows us to start with a proper and accurate ground zero. So after we've gone through the programming workshops, we'll generate a final product, which is the programming packet. This is an in-depth document that shows all the research and input that parishioners have put together, and it also shows several ideas of how a project can be developed. So this would be something that would be handed off to an architect at this point, and it becomes the business plan for how we're going to proceed forward. So it includes items such as the parish mission statement. From there, we'll go on and tell a little bit about the parish history, the makeup of the parish, and the activities that are involved in that, some population growth for that county that the parish is involved in. So we can look at them as data and also as this charts to give us a trend to be able to look at that and make wise decisions. So from there, we'll also give a good example of where the parish deanery, or the boundaries of the parish, exist for each individual parish. From there, we'll also look at the church population, how it's grown in family size. This is usually based off of registered household income. And then a little description about the population trends, a little overview of the liturgical schedule, how mass attendance and average number of people that are at each mass, so they can get a good sense of how large a new worship space needs to be. This would give a statistical overview of how the parish relates to other parishes in the archdiocese. Some information about religious education. So as we get to the parish income, we'll present this information, although it is rather sensitive information, in very general terms and charts. So you can see general parish expenses and the income compared to expenses to get a trend developing in the chart there. And from here, we'll start to develop a sources of funds. So from here, we can see, if I go and zoom in here a second. So in the sources of funds, we can start to look at ways by which we can generate the income to make a building project. And you'll see inside of here, we have an offertory of about 3 times. A good multiplier is 2 to 4 times here. And we'll just use an average of 3 to help give them an assessment of that. So you can see it starts to generate information about that and how these similar projects around the neighborhood and how they were cost and what their fundraising goals were. And then we'll give some general statistics on annual household contributions, and it can show you how Catholics will relate to the other denominations. And then we'll proceed into the archdiocesan liturgical guidelines. We like to give a document of that if the archdiocese has one or the diocese has one, of how the elements in the liturgical space should be utilized. In the schedule and process, we start to go over the methods for how these 10 steps get laid out. So we see we're in a programming step, schematic design, fundraising, design development, and we have a faster schedule and a slower schedule on the left and the right-hand side of this. So that gives an idea of how long the project would take and how the phases would unroll. And then from here is where it starts to get exciting. We start to look at the existing site plan and all the information that has been measured through our reconnaissance missions during the programming. And we'll start to draw existing elements and show what everything has. So in order to know what you need to know what you have. So usually you'll find that there's a lot of discrepancy between what people think you have and what you actually have. Here we'll have a summary of all the square footages and information about each one of those sites. We'll also do a review of the zoning requirements so that we know that we are meeting the proper setbacks and height restrictions and parking restrictions for that site. So from here, we also take from the programming the Parish Response. So this is a summary of all of the information that we can get through a programming workshop. So we'll do surveys from everybody to find out where the priorities are on what people need and what they're willing to pay for. So you can see a little summary there. Here we have a list of the subcommittees and all the different topics that each one is responsible for. We'll also talk about different seating configurations, the pros and cons of each one of those. So at this point, we start to design the possible elements just based off the square footage, and we do a little breakdown of cost assumptions for how we're going to be building these worship spaces here. So from here, we can generate conceptual renderings of each one of those spaces, and then we'll generate ideas of each space with numbers and how much it will cost and how they will be paid for. And you can see the different layouts of the different information inside of there. So that in essence is the outcome of the programming workshop. It is a book that helps you understand what we all agreed upon and explore different ideas of how they can be approached. And from there, we can move on into our next step, which is the schematic design, where we actually start to put flesh onto the bones of these ideas.